I would call a meeting to order. Good afternoon. We respectfully acknowledge that the Township of Algonquin Highlands is located on Treaty 20 Mississauga territory and in the traditional territory of the Mississauga and Chippewa Nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaties First Nations. We also acknowledge a historic shared presence of other Indigenous nations throughout the area, and we recognize these original inhabitants as the stewards of its lands and waters since time immemorial. Good afternoon. My name is Liz Danielson, and I'm the chair of the committee. I'd like to introduce the members of the committee that we have with us here today. John Rogers is a public member. Sabrina Richards as a councillor for Ward 2. And we have with us Sean O'Callaghan, who is our official planner, and Greg Moore, who is our building official. Mr. O'Callaghan will provide a brief overview of each application, after which the applicant or their agent will have an opportunity to address the committee. Following this, anyone who wishes to speak to the application, either in support or against, will be given an opportunity to do so. The committee will then discuss the proposal and be given the opportunity to ask questions of both our planner and the applicants. We'll then vote to grant, refuse, or defer the proposal. So could I have a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda today? Member Rogers, Member Sabrina, Member Richards, sorry.
Moved by John Rogers, second by Sabrina Richards. Be it resolved that the Committee of Adjustment hereby approves as circulated the meeting agenda of January 31st, 2025.
All in favor? That's carried. Could I have a mover and a seconder then to approve the minutes of November the 1st? Member Richards, Member Rogers.
Moved by Sabrina Richards, second by John Rogers. Be it resolved the Committee of Adjustment hereby approves as circulated the meeting minutes of November 1st, 2024.
All in favor? That's carried. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof today? Hearing none, we'll move into the new business, and the first application is by Peck in the Township of Stanhope.
This property is located at 1127 McLaughlin Point Lane. The lands are zoned shoreline residential 2 with exception 7 and designated waterfront under the official plan. The property is approximately 13.12 acres in area with 68.5 meters of frontage on Halls Lake. Surrounding uses are generally shoreline residential, and the lands are currently developed with a dwelling, a dock, shed, and a detached garage. The owner is proposing to demolish the existing single-story detached garage and construct a new 2-story detached garage with a sleeping cabin on the 2nd story in the same general footprint. The proposed garage is to be located at 35 meters from the high water mark. So the variances being requested are from section 4.2.5 of the zoning bylaw to increase the maximum height of an accessory structure from 6 meters to 7 meters for the 2-story detached garage, and from section 4.2.10 I of the zoning bylaw to increase the maximum area of a sleeping cabin from 45 square meters to 57.6 square meters. Staff are not supportive of the proposed minor variance to permit the increased height or the additional floor area for the sleeping cabin, as there is limited planning rationale, and there appears to be opportunity to construct the proposed garage in compliance with the township zoning bylaw. Notice of the application was posted on the property, posted on the township website, and circulated to property owners within 60 meters of the subject lands, as well as to the County of Haliburton and to the Halls-Hawk Lake Association. No letters of objection were received. A letter of support was received from a neighboring property owner. I'll just read that for the committee. Hi, Sean. We are writing to confirm support for the PEC's plan to build a new garage and sleeping area at their existing garage site with 3 feet extra building height. We support this plan since we understand the alternatives would have more of an impact on the wooded area of our neighborhood or be more noticeable from the water. We are aware that they are asking for more square footage, but this does not concern us since this is inside the building and does not change the exterior footprint. By choosing to rebuild where they are now, we believe it is the most thoughtful decision. The applicant also provided some additional correspondence, which was circulated to the committee. However, staff are still recommending refusal of the application.
Questions from the committee for Sean? Go ahead.
Oh, microphone.
Thank you. I will have some questions. I think later on I prefer to hear from the applicant before I
Okay,
have some comments from Sean.
are you good with that? Would you like to speak to the committee? Okay, you need to come to the microphone.
In the way of the camera, just?
No.
No, okay, okay. Good,
So if you would state your name and association to the application.
sure, Jeff Peck. So we own the property, as Sean mentioned. So if it makes sense, I'll spend a couple minutes and go through the design and so on. And I'll just mention, I had, I think, a really good chat with Sean last week, understanding some of the logic and, as you said, the design. Normally, it's a common approach to do a two-story building like that, so there should be a way. So I thought I'd better make sure I explain the design rationale and why it's not working like a normal one for it. So I'll try and do that. So as you mentioned, a 3 foot higher height we were looking for. And I'll first say that's something we'd rather avoid ourselves. If we could be within as low as possible, our own preference is to be low. The design issue we have is really what's driving the extra height requirement. So it is a garage build with a second floor bunkie, more sleeping space for our family and kids. The main restriction we have is we're, as mentioned, trying to rebuild in the same garage site. And it's between a right of way on one side and then our driveway on the other side. So to take advantage of using that space versus building somewhere else, and I could talk about the other two options, we actually had to carve out part of the back corner of the garage. So picture, if you will, it's a rectangle, but a section is removed because the right of way turns through it. Had we not needed to do that, we would have been totally fine with our design. So we spent quite a bit of time with Emerson going through design options. And they said, really, we didn't have a choice on what we're trying to do here. So, and what that is we're trying to do interior stairs, mostly for safety. I think it'll help the look as well to be cleaner. And the interior stairs would normally be able to go up the back if it was a rectangle building, but there's simply no other option to place the stairs in the building because of this jut out against the right of way. So that's really kind of the logic that I was thinking about that, Sean, after we talked, that, you know, you said often people will do that on a rectangular shape, and we would have absolutely been able to put the stairs in the back. In this case, we can't. So that's really the main point of the design. The other two options we have are we build in a whole different place, and unfortunately we'd have to pull down a lot of trees, which we don't want to do. It would also be right against our neighbor's property line, which I guarantee he wouldn't want and would prefer to avoid. Whereas if we rip down the garage here, we're really not disrupting the property because there's a garage already. So option one would be that build in a wooded area. We'd prefer not trees come down. Option two was we talked about adding on to the cottage, but that's quite a bit closer. It's half again as close to the water. And I know our neighbors would rather it be hidden back when we have all that property if it's back out of the way versus seeing more from the water. So we're trying to have this philosophy of build up with the bunkie instead of build out somewhere else and pull down trees or be closer to the water is really what we're trying to do there. As I say, we did spend quite a bit of time with Emerson and we tried hard to keep it as low as we could. And this is what we ended up with. A couple of things that I think may help mitigate it. The size of the property, as I mentioned, we're back in. It's also set down 2 to 4 feet. So on 3 sides, it's 2 to 4 feet higher, the land. So it kind of offsets that 3-foot extra space we're looking for. So visually, we're thinking even for ourselves, that'll help mitigate the perception of height. The other thing we're doing when you enter the cottage, there's the piece at the back, we're keeping single story again to make it look as low as we possibly can when you drive up to the property. So we tried to consider everything we could. I guess that's the summary, if that raises any questions or.
I'm sure we have some questions
Okay.
or comments.
Yep.
So, Member Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Peck. Just a quick question about the use of you keep referring to it as the cottage. Do you use it
Oh, I'm
as?
sorry. That's garage. It's garage on the bottom, bunkie on top.
Yeah, but the main building, is it a cottage or is it your permanent
Yes,
residence?
it's cottage.
Cottage,
Yeah,
okay. thank
yeah.
you. And the neighbor that has given us a positive comment is, which side are they on?
The option where we would build into the trees, they're
Okay.
closer to that.
Okay, so further along the laneway.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So if we did the alternative of rip down the trees, they're closer that way.
Right, okay.
So I think that's what brought that on, and they said the same thing with the water. If we don't have to see it, all the better.
Okay.
Mm.
Thank you. I have no further questions unless Sabrina, you know. So I would, and Mr. Peck, if you could stay there, I just do have some questions of Sean and
Well, now
Sean.
is the time to ask Sean.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
yeah, the report that we got from Mr. Peck with the notations was, I thought, well done and well done, Mr. Peck. It helped me. And when I went to do the site inspection, I did notice that distinct difference in elevations, and so the impact of the height, I don't think is going to be a big issue in my own mind. So that I thought was a valid point that was being made. The thing I found interesting was Mr. Peck had gone through and found 4 other applications where we've approved variances, not identical, but somewhat similar to this. Any thoughts on those comparatives?
Yeah, it's difficult to say. I mean, each application is evaluated on its own merits. I mean, the big component that led me to my conclusion was that it's very difficult to argue why you need more space for a sleeping cabin when it's already a very generous amount, being the 485 square feet. I can appreciate it's a larger acreage property, but in my mind, it's difficult to support any increase in area for those accessory structures where there's already a limit set. And yeah, I struggle to see any real planning justification for it. I can, from a personal standpoint, I can appreciate people wanting more space, but just strictly from a planning perspective, it's difficult for me to support.
Okay. And just on that point then, Mr. Peck,
Do you have another question?
I do have another question. It's with respect to the design. My understanding is the reason you have to go higher is because you want to do interior stairs and you don't want to jut out. Is that correct?
Right.
Is that, and that also, to my mind, I thought that's one reason why there was an increase in the square footage was because you need a landing, you need the stairwell.
That's exactly it. I did prepare a simple diagram. Would it be smart to share it, or is that?
We have diagrams.
I had not submitted this one. I thought I should do it this week, and then I realized I didn't send it ahead. Is it still okay to share it, or I can explain it, whichever?
Well, it's probably better to look at it than to, visuals are always better. So we could just maybe give it to or you've got one for everybody. Okay.
Old-fashioned paper.
Yeah. Thank you.
We like old fashioned paper.
Well, I guess it's not even. So. The points in the diagram on the, I didn't keep one from the top, but on the upper left side, you can see the right of way and the driveway and how we're squished between it. And you see how we had to cut a piece out of the garage. So then because of that, we looked at every stair option that we could put in. So the green box on the right side shows where the stairs go up to the side. The red markers show all the alternatives that we talked to Emerson and Taylor about, could we put the stairs somewhere else that would allow us to be within the 3-foot height? The only option we had was to go up the side. So when you land at the top of the stairs, because of the slope of the roof, you're way under the 8-foot ceiling. It's more like probably 5 foot or something like that. So getting up the side, you come to a shorter ceiling, and then because it's in the corner, getting around into the bunking meant we needed some extra square footage.
Thank you.
If
Thank
that-
you. That's very helpful.
Okay.
That drawing is very helpful. Yeah. Okay, I think those are all the questions I have.
now.
And I do have some comments, but I guess we'll wait and see if there's other questions.
Member Richards, do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions. I understand everything quite clearly.
Okay, I personally, I don't have any issue with the height. That, given that it's in the same location, that kind of works for me. I really do like the idea of not cutting down a whole bunch of trees, although I would say that it looks to me like there is enough room there to leave a buffer of trees between you and the neighbor. If you were to build a garage there, there's enough room there. My issue is with the size of the bunkie. This is beyond the size of what we list as a minimum square footage for a residence. And to me, it's just too big to be classified as a bunkie. So I would, if I was to agree to it myself, it would have to be a smaller square footage bunkie. Otherwise, I don't really have a big problem with it. I think that I'm not sure when I look at this diagram that you've just given us, why, oh no, never mind. You did answer that about the height of the doorway. I was thinking like, why couldn't it be on the outside? But I get that. I really do have a problem though with the amount of square footage that's being identified for a bunkie. As I say, it's larger than what we have as minimum square footage for a single family residence. So it's too much. And to me, there's too much risk, and I'm not saying that you would necessarily do this, but properties do change hands over time for it to become a second residence, and we don't allow that on waterfront property. So those are my concerns, and I don't know if there's any way that you can address them or.
So we talked about the other ones that were approved, and like Sean said, it's not a precedent. You can't really look at it that way, but I tried to be close to what were approved. So we're at 620, and I saw a 611 and 676.
We're looking at the merits of this application
Okay, yeah.
and not to be compared to other applications which may have had different
Right,
circumstances associated with.
with Sean mentioned, yeah. So it's 600, it's all about being able to get around and use as close as we could get to get around that corner, so.
Unless you can, from my, I mean, I'm just one vote. But from my perspective, in order for me to say yay, it would have to be a smaller square footage for the bunkie.
Okay, I certainly have spent hours on the design trying to figure out how to get inside that 44, but the height is the biggest issue. It's a no-go without it, and I guess
Yeah.
if.
That's not for me, that's not a problem in
Okay.
it.
Is there some compromise level of versus 484 or?
Well, I guess you'd probably I would have to go back to the drawing board. I mean, I'm not about to say it right now, looking at 620 square feet, it's too big.
Yeah, okay,
And too easy for it to become a second residence, something that could be rented out as a short-term rental.
right,
And I have a problem with that.
yeah, makes sense, okay.
Councillor Richards. Member Richards.
I might want to let Sean go first, but just quickly. What can we put in place to ensure it doesn't become an Airbnb on the property?
So the short-term rental license bylaw right now prohibits, or sorry, no, it does allow for a bunkie to be rented out, but not a second residence, right? So, yeah, I'd have to look into whether or not we could include that as a condition. I'm not 100% sure that we would be able to.
If you want to, that's 100% fine by me, that bunkie doesn't get rented, it will never be rented out, yeah.
I understand that. The concern is if you sell the property, the next owner could rent it out.
Right, okay,
So the, as far as I understand, in the STR bylaw, you have to rent the entire property. You cannot rent the bunkie separately from the main residence.
That is correct.
So that's one consideration. I think the other concern would be is if like a kitchen were placed inside this, I see there's a bathroom. Is there anything that, like we can pull this back in? Because the other thing I would be concerned about is not just Airbnb, but this could be rented as like
Just a
just a
second
rental, not
residence.
a short-term rental, but a residence, and we don't allow for that on waterfront, right?
Yes.
So how do we limit that?
So right now in the zoning bylaw, the definition of a sleeping cabin strictly prohibits a kitchen or any sort of cooking facility being within a sleeping cabin. If those were to be constructed, it would not be a legal structure anymore. It would actually be considered a dwelling at that point, and would not be in compliance with the bylaw.
Which we're 100% good with that. It's about sleeping capacity for family and strongly encourage grandkids. So that's.
To be in another building.
Yeah, right. Get the noise out there.
I understand that, but I mean, this still, we're talking about what our minimum and maximum requirements are.
Yeah.
And, and for me, the square footage also allows for, at some point in time, somebody to just tuck in a nice little kitchen in the corner and renting it out.
Right.
Go ahead, Sean.
So if the committee were wanting to see if there's any potential to tweak the design to reduce the square footage, the committee could defer the matter. And we could work with the applicant to see if there's any opportunity to do that. And I could also look into the short-term rental component to see if we can include that as some sort of condition. Just an option for the committee to consider, if that's something Mr. Peck would be interested in as well.
Yeah, so short-term rental, you mean on the building itself, like on the new structure? Yeah.
I believe that's, what.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
100% fine to say
Okay.
no to that one.
If there is an opportunity to reduce the size of the square footage of the bunkie area, that like I would rather defer it if that's acceptable to you, than deny it.
Yeah.
Give you a further chance to have a look at it. Because as I say, for my purposes, I don't have a problem with the height so much. I'd rather see it stay in the same location as opposed to, cutting down trees or.
Okay.
And it sounds to me like Member Rogers is not terribly concerned about the height.
I'm not concerned about the square footage at all. I was just concerned about the possibility in the future of it becoming a residence or a short-term rental.
But that's the two tie together. Because
I
it's-
don't think so.
Well, I do.
If there's a way that we can ensure that that doesn't happen, I'm good with that rather than, having to reduce the square footage. Because I understand when you have children in a growing family and grandchildren, you need the extra space.
That's not included in the zoning bylaw. That we're going to have different sizes based on the number of children that you've got. I'm sorry, but that's just, I'm sticking to my guns on the square footage. I mean, but it's your thoughts on that?
I have no problem with square footage either. I think the concerns being raised about short-term rentals is something that if Sean can come up with something, that would be great. And if that alleviates concerns, then that's great. I personally don't have a problem with this application. And I have to admit, my own property is, I've got two structures and.
Let's not go on to your property. Mr.
Well, no,
Rogers.
they're totally legal, but it's just that whole concept of having some additional space that, especially when you're to grandparenting, it's helpful to have a separate spot. So I would actually move that we defer this application to a point to be determined by the applicant and Sean as to when to come
Defer
back.
for what purpose?
In my mind, it's to determine if there's a methodology of determining the short-term rental prohibitions.
Go ahead.
I think we're gonna find that on the short term, like it is a concern to me about the short-term rental issue. If the septic capacity is there for the 2 bedrooms, though, would we deny a short-term rental being on the property? If the entire property is rented out, because we're already saying in the short-term rentals that no, you can't rent out the bunkie separately from the cottage. It has to be the entire property. And if the septic capacity is there, what are we denying?
The application is not for a short-term rental, though. Sean, have you got some comments to make?
Well, septic capacity is something we look at with short-term rentals, but it's also typically a condition of these approvals, so they wouldn't necessarily be able to construct this unless the septic capacity is there to begin with, whether it's a short-term rental or not. So we couldn't really rely on that to prohibit short-term rentals because they wouldn't be able to construct this if the septic's not there to begin with.
Go ahead.
Well, in that case, then if the short-term rental bylaw is already protecting the land by, it has to be the entire property, septic is already in place. I don't have a problem with the height or the square footage, so I don't have a need to defer. I can proceed with the application.
Wood, it sounds like you're both on the same page, so if you want to make a resolution,
I'm quite prepared to move that the application be approved as submitted. And I do have some comments if Sabrina is prepared to second that motion.
well, if she's prepared to second the motion, there doesn't need to be any further
Yeah.
comments.
But I'm always concerned when we go against staff's recommendations. I think Sean understands this one's a little bit out of the ordinary. And I have to say to Mr. Peck and others that I do support our staff, and I think our staff do a wonderful job in this particular case. I think that especially after the site inspection, I drove up to it and I thought, no, it makes sense. It would be nice if it could be sleeping accommodation right there and not disturb the site.
Member Richards.
Those are my sentiments exactly. The site, it being set back as far as it is, the driveway in between, rather than eliminating more vegetation in the surrounding area by building it in a different location, although it would be removing vegetation, whether those are trees or just ground coverage. So
Are
I
you
think
prepared to second the motion?
the area is good. And yes, I'm prepared to second the motion.
So you have a mover and a seconder. I can't agree and won't agree. I'm sorry. I have no problem with the height. I have no problem with the location. I have definite problem with the size. So I will be voting against your application.
I should comment that, but when I make the motions with our typical conditions attached.
Right, yes, I have prepared a motion in support, just in case.
So you have a mover and a seconder.
Yeah. So moved by John Rogers, second by Sabrina Richards, be it resolved, the Committee of Adjustment hereby approves minor variance application HMV 00225 to seek relief from section 4.2.5 of the zoning bylaw to increase the maximum height of an accessory structure from 6 meters to 7 meters for the purpose of constructing a 2-story detached garage. And from section 4.2.10I of the zoning bylaw to increase the maximum area of a sleeping cabin permitted from 45 square meters to 57.6 square meters for the purpose of constructing a sleeping cabin on the 2nd story of a garage, subject to the following condition: that any on-site sewage system permits and reviews required by the township have been obtained and approved prior to the issuance of a building permit.
All in favor? And I'm against. So your application has been approved. No construction for 20 days, I believe it is, to allow for appeal period. Good luck with your project.
Okay, appreciate the opportunity. It's a motivating area to be in, to get involved in this. Looks like an interesting area to. I worked in municipal council as a university student at one time and loved it. So it looks.
It is
enjoyable.
interesting. It
Yeah.
truly is an interesting role to play.
Exactly. And I have to say, I appreciate the time Sean spent with me last week as well. just I absolutely understand all the criteria that goes into this, and not an easy job, that's for sure.
No.
So anyway, appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, the next application is Mooney on, in the Township of McClintock.
You're welcome to leave it.
Or stay if you wish.
Okay.
Sure.
So this property is located at 1203 Camp Bay Drive on Talk Lake. The lands are zoned shoreline residential 2 and designated waterfront under the official plan. The property is approximately 3.34 acres in area with 73.1 meters of frontage on Talk Lake. The surrounding uses are generally shoreline residential and crown land. The lands are currently developed with a dwelling, a shed, a privy, and a dock. The applicants are proposing to demolish an existing 1,528 square foot two-story dwelling and construct a new 2,405 square foot two-story dwelling on the same footprint. The existing dwelling is currently set back 10.6 meters from the high water mark, and the closest point of the proposed dwelling will be 15 meters. Existing site infrastructure, including accessory structures, a right-of-way, driveway, septic system, along with an irregular shoreline and topographical constraints, do restrict the available building location for a proposed dwelling that would comply with the zoning bylaw. The applicant is therefore seeking the following relief, and that is from section 4.14.94 of the zoning bylaw to increase the maximum gross floor area permitted from 40% to 161% for the purpose of constructing a 2,405 square foot two-story dwelling. Notice of the application was posted on the property, posted on the township website, and circulated to property owners within 60 meters of the subject lands, as well as to the County of Haliburton and the Otter Lake Property Owners Association. No objections have been received, and staff are recommending approval of the proposed minor variance with the following conditions. One, confirmation being provided from an Ontario land surveyor that the proposed dwelling is not located closer than 15 meters from the high water mark prior to any clearing, site alteration, or the issuance of a building permit. Two, any on-site sewage system permits and reviews required by the township have been obtained and approved prior to the issuance of a building permit. And three, that appropriate construction mitigation measures be implemented, including the erection and maintenance of silt fencing between the proposed building and the shoreline.
Are there questions from the committee members for Sean?
You have two agents who logged on now.
Okay, I just had one question about, I just wonder what guides the justification when we have limitations in our zoning bylaw about the allowable percentage of increase. What allows us to, what guides the ability to go so far beyond that?
Yeah, it goes back again to each application being evaluated on its own merits. In this particular case, there's a lot of things on the site, like the right-of-way, accessory structures that stop them from moving back further, where they would cross that threshold into an additional percentage being allowed to that building. In this case, it's also a two-story dwelling already, and they're proposing to replace it with a two-story dwelling. So it is larger than what's there right now. But in my review, it seemed like a reasonable increase with them trying to push it back further, because it is going to be further back than what the existing building is right now. So there's certainly intent there to try and conform to the bylaw, but they are restricted given the site restrictions.
Unfortunately, in this particular application, we ended up in, we couldn't find a property,
No, okay.
so. Sorry. Was this the one that was plowed in? So I understand that we have two agents here online. Mr. Dennis and Ms. Forsyth. Did you wish to speak to the application?
I think we're just going to bring them in.
They can hear us, so can't they?
Yes, good afternoon, committee.
Good afternoon.
Lanny Dennis Planning. Sandy Forsyth, the designer, and the applicant is also here today as well. I've been involved since the inception of the project. Just so for a bit of history and a bit of background, I think what Sean has indicated is a fair and accurate assessment of the proposal, and certainly appreciate all the efforts of staff bringing the application forward, and concur with the planning department to approve the application, including the recommended conditions. As Sean had noted, each site is based on its own merits. And just to go through the merits of the proposal, just to touch on them, I think Sean has done so already, but maybe just to highlight those. The dwelling is moved further back, was 10.6 meters, and now it's 15 meters from the shoreline. The deck was moved back from 8.2 meters to 12 meters further back from the shoreline. The topography sort of constrains the ability to move the building further back. I think the photos indicate the steepness of the property. In fact, if anything, if you tried to move things back, you might even pop the building higher than what it might be now, lower to the shoreline, providing a greater visual impact. I think that the new siding improves the siding for the neighbor, makes it more parallel rather than looking sort of to the side. There are a number of other constraints on the property as well. As noted, there's accessory structures, there's the driveway, there's the hill, there's the right of way at the back of the property. So there is limited opportunity to go elsewhere. As noted, the existing dwelling is 2 stories, and essentially the second story on the new building is roughly the same size as the existing 2-story. So that helps with mass and bulk when you're talking about the height. Actually, utilizing the same general footprint minimizes the disruption to the property. And of course, if you had to move it further back, you'd be into probably some rock removal and certainly tree removal. So the idea would be to sort of build where we are to minimize that footprint. I think there's ample area in frontage on the property to accommodate the request. I think if you look at the shoreline, it's fairly modest shoreline development. There's no other exceptions required. I don't believe there's any public concerns. I'm not aware of any right at this particular moment, and therefore would respectfully request committee approve it as it meets the 4 tests of the minor variance and as there are no unacceptable adverse impacts. Thanks.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Dennis? Questions for Mr. Dennis? Okay, would somebody like to move approval of the application?
Sean.
Oh, sorry, John.
Sorry, I just wanted to read one comment that I forgot to during my report there. It was a comment received from the County of Haliburton. It is supportive, but it just had a quick note just with respect to vegetation, so I'll just read that for the committee. The applicant is encouraged to protect and preserve as much tree cover and natural vegetation as possible during demolition of the existing dwelling and construction of the new dwelling within 20 meters of the shoreline. The applicant is encouraged to rehabilitate and restore natural vegetative cover in place of the previous building footprint within the 20-meter front yard.
Thank you. So we have a mover and a seconder. Did I hear you second? Those comments kind of go to your property, Mr. Peck.
Moved by John Rogers, second by Sabrina Richards. Be it resolved, the Committee of Adjustment hereby grants minor variance application AHMV 1824 to seek relief from section 4.14.94 of the zoning bylaw to increase the maximum gross floor area permitted from 40% to 161% for the purpose of constructing a 2,405 square foot two-story dwelling. Conditional on confirmation being provided from an Ontario land surveyor that the proposed dwelling is not located closer than 15 meters from the high water mark prior to any clearing or site alteration or the issuance of a building permit. 2, that any on-site sewage system permits and reviews required by the township have been obtained and approved prior to the issuance of a building permit. And 3, that appropriate construction mitigation measures be implemented, including the erection and maintenance of silt fencing between the proposed building and the shoreline.
All in favor? It's carried.
Thank
So
you.
the application has been approved. Finally, our third application is by Yankus and Lewis for development in the township of Stanhope. I believe this is the one that was not plowed. Thanks.
This property is located at 1231 Halls Lake Road. The lands are zoned shoreline residential 2 and environmental protection and designated waterfront under the official plan. The property is approximately 1.17 acres in area with 59 meters of frontage on Big Hawk Lake Road. Surrounding uses are generally rural residential and shoreline residential, and the lands are currently vacant. The applicant is proposing to construct a 460 square foot dwelling. The proposed dwelling will comply with all minimum setback requirements. The subject lands are not directly fronting on the Kinesis River and would be considered a backlot. Table 2 of the zoning bylaw does require a minimum dwelling area of 55 square meters, and the applicant is proposing to construct a dwelling at 42.7 square meters. Therefore, the following relief is being sought, and that is from Table 2 of the zoning bylaw to reduce the minimum dwelling area from 55 square meters to 42.7 square meters. The proposed dwelling location will not be within the portion of the property identified as environmental protection lands. Notice of the application was posted on the property, posted on the township website, and circulated to property owners within 60 meters of the subject lands, as well as to the county of Haliburton. No objections have been received. A letter of support was received from a property owner. I don't believe their address is on there, but it's just, yeah, Sean, I'm writing to support the application for minor variance, and I would like, if possible, to be advised of the outcome of the application. Staff are recommending approval of the proposed minor variance with the following condition: that any on-site sewage system permits and reviews required by the township have been obtained and approved prior to the issuance of a building permit.
Questions for Sean? Go ahead.
Why is the number that we have as a minimum square footage the number that we have?
Because that's what we decided. Well, and that's my concern about this application, that it's smaller than the minimum that we've set for residential purposes. And I mean, this is sort of the opposite argument that I made for the first application.
Yep, so that's fair. My understanding is this building is a pre-constructed dwelling, so it's already been assembled and it's brought to site and put on a permanent foundation, so it still meets the definition of a dwelling.
Oh, it's already there?
No, it's not on the property, but
Pardon me? No, I understand that, but it just sounded like it was already on its. And we don't have we come to I can't recall. I know we've had a fair bit of discussion about tiny houses, but I don't know that we've come to any conclusion about allowing tiny houses.
So council, when we updated our zoning bylaw, reduced the minimum dwelling size
To
to the 55 yeah, it was reduced for the rural residential zone to 55 square meters, which is 592 square feet, whereas before it was closer to 800, I believe.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So we're still under the minimum square footage here.
Mhm.
You know, I know that there were a number of arguments, brought back and forth about tiny houses and houses that were smaller and whether it was the, adequate use of the property and depending on the size of the property. Anyway, I'd look for comments or questions from members. Go ahead.
So just one other point with respect to council reviewing the zoning bylaw, the minimum dwelling size was eliminated altogether within the rural zone. Those are the larger acreage properties. So there is no technical minimum dwelling size in those zones. This property is zoned rural residential, but just so the committee has that information, it's something council has considered.
Go ahead.
If it did meet the minimum square footage, would it impact the environmentally protected land?
No, the EP area is more along the road frontage. It's based on old mapping, but unfortunately, that's what we have to rely on right now. But when it comes time to update our official plan, it's something we'll be looking at updating.
Comments from yourself, Mr. Rogers?
I don't believe the
we
applicant
don't.
or their agent is here.
And I agree with Sean's analysis and I had a son who lived in something that was at 500 square feet and condos in Toronto are selling at about 400 square feet and people are living in them and it's a lifestyle choice that someone wants to make. The design of this looks very, very standard for a manufactured home and I have no problem with it. It's going to be well hidden from the road. It's a nice site for something like this. And I support Sean's recommendation.
There's been a lot of discussion about, tiny homes, minimum square footage requirements, and I think that, nobody is against that. I think we just have looked at what's the best use of like the size of property. I mean, you can kind of understand it being in an apartment building or on a smaller lot, but it's, using a larger lot are you getting the best use of the land? But I mean, that's something to be yet to be discussed. We need to land on the tiny house issue.
That's an excellent point, and I should also note that because the property is zoned rural residential, there is opportunity in the future for the owner to construct a new dwelling that's larger and this be turned into an accessory detached dwelling. So there's still opportunity for further development on the property.
So any other questions or comments? Could I have a mover and a seconder then to approve the application?
I'll move the recommendation.
Seconded by member Richards.
Moved by John Rogers, second by Sabrina Richards, be it resolved, the Committee of Adjustment hereby grants minor variance application HMV 1924 to seek relief from Table 2 of the zoning bylaw to reduce the minimum dwelling area from 55 square meters to 42.7 square meters, conditional on any on-site sewage system permits and reviews required by the township being obtained and approved prior to the issuance of a building permit.
All in favor? So that is approved, and that takes care of the applications that we have before us. Was there any other business that we need to discuss today,
No, not that I'm aware of.
except for scheduling the next meeting?
And
Go
Chair,
ahead.
Just on that point about scheduling, would it be possible to do a tentative schedule for this year, just so that we all have something in our books? And I find it sometimes difficult. I have to wait to this meeting in order to be able to plan for next month. I usually say it's the last Friday, but it would just be nice to have just a tentative schedule set forth.
Well, in this case, the last Friday in February would not work
Mm-hmm.
because
On the other committee that I sit on, we've got one in February that has to be on a Wednesday instead of a Monday because of scheduling conflicts. And so we know a year or not a year in advance, at the start of the year, what the schedule is going to be.
Yeah, but if I could make a proposal,
Yep, by all means.
because we do have council budget meetings on the last Friday of February. I would suggest we perhaps move the next meeting to the end of March, and I can bring forward a tentative schedule for the committee's consideration at that meeting.
So that's tentatively March 28th.
Yes.
Does that, at this point in time, does that work? We all have the same challenges. And we have two members that are missing here today too, so.
Exactly.
Does that work for you? Okay. Could I have a motion to adjourn? Councillor Richards, Member Rogers.
Moved by Sabrina Richards, second by John Rogers. Be it resolved, the Committee of Adjustment hereby adjourns its regular meeting at 1:51 PM.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you, one and all.